welcome to How to Be a Wizard, episode 2. With me, I have another good friend called Shea Doyle. I don't know why I introduce everyone by their full names.
In case someone wants to Facebook stalk me.
Yeah, like your pupils or...
Yes. My name's not even Shea Doyle on Facebook, so it's fine. I've done the same thing.
What is it?
That kind of defeats the point.
It does. So, I've known Shea for about 10 years as well.
Yeah.
We went to uni together. We studied psychology at the University of Kent together. And then kind of after university, we lived together.
For 4 years.
4 years.
Forget that bit.
Yeah. And then kind of after university, we kind of went on our separate, despite doing the same course, we went on our separate kind of career routes. And Shea decided to go into teaching. And so I just kind of wanted to have a conversation with you about getting into teaching, because I think you've had quite a...
Circuitous.
Yeah.
Circuitous route into it.
And then also your feelings on like the education system and things like this.
Mm-hmm. I am an expert, obviously.
Well, being in the education system, I guess, you know, and I mean, you're fresh in it, but sometimes the freshest eyes are the ones that see the most.
Yes, that are already jaded.
So, tell me a little bit about kind of your journey to becoming a teacher.
Okay, so as you know, I did a psychology degree and I finished that in 2014, and by the time I reached the end of it, I was kind of there and thinking, well, I had not the best final 6 months of a psychology degree and decided that I didn't really want to do psychology anymore. So instead, I started to do like youth work, and through the youth work I decided that I wanted to keep working with children, and eventually I managed to find myself a job. This is really awkward to me because the camera's here. Sorry. I know
you can look at me.
Because the camera's here, and because I've been warned not to.
Yeah,
my whole
just
face
for lighting. Yeah, just for lighting. I've asked him to look at light switches over there. But if it's more comfortable to have a conversation, then
it's fine. Well,
then
it's fine.
Actually, look at me.
No,
that's fine. I'll turn as well.
I'm gonna stage look at you. So
I just knocked the table again. I'm really bad at this whole podcasting, aren't I?
It's teething problems. That's how it is.
Carry on.
Yes, so decided I didn't want to do psychology, and after a little gap doing youth work, got a job in a school, worked there for a couple of years, until I realised that I wasn't really going anywhere, just sort of helping out in an English department. And then I did my PGC starting in September and finished it five weeks ago, something like that. Yeah.
Amazing. So you finished it now? Oh.
Finished PGC.
Excellent.
I am a very recent newly qualified teacher, which means I've got 1 year of like actually getting paid to teach this time.
Amazing.
But while still training, and then following that, it's
you can do whatever you want. Yeah.
Off you go into the world.
Brilliant. And you teach primary school.
Yes.
Is that what PGC is?
No, so PGC is just one route to go into teaching.
Okay.
Yeah, the PGC would be for secondary, for sixth form, for everything.
Okay.
No, but mine is a primary school PGC one. But
okay.
I can technically... I don't know if I can do it this year. I mean, I'm not doing it this year. But I can, I think, go into secondary teaching with the qualification I have. It's just that the current specialisation is primary school.
Okay, cool. So you found it quite difficult getting into that kind of teaching program, though, didn't you? Not necessarily that teaching program, but just getting into teaching in the first place. I seem to remember you having quite a difficult route.
So so once I finished university, because my thing wasn't really based in working with young people, working with children, like I did a youth work course that lasts for a month that I don't know if it's worth saying the name, or if they'd be alright with me saying the name of it.
Yeah, don't worry about the name, but...
Yeah. But it basically lasts a month, and it's working with 16 to 17 year olds, and I would be applying for jobs, and I'd say, yeah, this is my experience, I've worked with children, and
yeah,
I've struggled at first to like get interviews, and then, but the thing I always found the most nerve-wracking at first was like being 21 trying to apply for jobs in schools and interacting with sort of 15-year-olds, and they've got their own ideas and they're all headstrong and they're everything you are at 15.
Yeah.
But me at 21, probably not really confident enough to be going into that and just like owning a space like you kind of need to do when you're teaching, really.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, I've struggled a bit to get into working in schools. Programs for teaching, I was a bit frustrated with the school I was previously working at, because I used to work in a secondary school. Like, I was a bit frustrated with them.
Because they didn't offer you any progression?
Because there was no route to progression, which is
just
why...
stuck in your teaching assistant role?
It was, so I was a teaching assistant in an English department, and under another boss that was more interested in progression, I probably would have been able to carry on there and continue to work there and carry on living in this house that we're in now. And it just wasn't happening, so like I kind of had to, I guess, like drop out of work and go back to university, which is a bit of a...
Yeah. And I think that's quite a common thing in people in our generation of university goers.
I think so.
Having that kind of like initial kind of like university given confidence and drive, and then having that kind of like crushed a little bit by the actual working world. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. I think
there's a lot of hope that university gives you, and you can be, if you're studying a psychology degree, you can be a top psychologist by the time you're 27, and they bring someone in that is doing that, and it's like, oh, okay, this is hope, but then
it's like, achievable. Everything's very achievable.
Yeah.
But then it's reality. It's not. I think like part of the thing is that everyone's encouraged to go to university now. So I don't know if the percentage is up to this at this point, but there was a time where whatever government it was at the time wanted 50% of everyone to go to university.
Yeah.
And I don't think it ever got to those numbers, but it went up and up and up and up, and it's quite high now. And that naturally just devalues your degree.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same. It just acts like a currency, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you spend your time, you do these 3 years, and then you leave and find that actually it's not worth that much, because just to get the jobs that 10, 15 years ago you wouldn't have needed to get a degree with, you now need a degree.
Yeah. And it's really weird, like a lot of those jobs are like handyman jobs or like nursing and stuff like that. And maybe nursing you do need a bit of kind of like theory knowledge on like kind of like the physical nature of the body and stuff like that, but nursing never needed a degree before, and now in order to get into nursing you have to do a degree. You do.
I think like I don't think there's an issue with nurses having degrees. I think that's a good thing. I think the travesty on that front, and this is a conversation that we said we wouldn't be having really,
right,
but I think the travesty on that front is that they took away the funding. So now if you're going to be a nurse or a midwife or whatever, you have to pay to do it.
Yeah.
And then they don't pay you well enough.
Yeah, so, but it's kind of like steps. Like they've done it in steps. So firstly, you could go in as a healthcare assistant and then be trained as a nurse on the job, which is how they used to do it.
Okay.
Then they added this university degree level, so people would have to go through a degree in order to become a nurse, which I'm kind of like in two minds about. I think learning on a job is important, but then also doing the theory is important as well, just as important. And then the third thing they did was take away the funding. Yeah, that was that's just a fine. And I know people personally that have lost lost their jobs. Well, not lost their jobs, but they just don't have any progression now because they wanted to go into nursing and they're healthcare assistants. But now they can't. And it's like, well, what are the government expecting when they have like... And I think the same thing probably is for teaching. I don't know if it's the same thing for teaching, whether there's still good funding for it.
Teaching's a strange one. Teaching decades and decades ago, so the training course that I went on, they told us about, in the 1970s it was like this, and it's like, great, I don't need to know that. But in the 1970s and before, you didn't need a degree to be a teacher. You could just train to be a teacher, and then you were a teacher, well done. You didn't need to do it through a degree. I don't think there's many of those people. I don't think there's any of those people still around. Right, yeah. I know that the Goldsmiths that I did my PGC at are this September putting through honorary degrees for like people who are like 90 years old who never got one, or were teachers at the time.
And are struggling to find work.
Well, no, they're not struggling to find work. I think it's more like I think it's more like one of those things where they pardon people after their death. You know, it's
right.
like so
it's
not that they're dead at 90.
You did technically get a degree, so
yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's sort of them losing out, like through a lack of a degree, but it's definitely different. Like it's definitely you definitely see people who you think you're really good at this, but you're not going to go anywhere. And there are jobs that I think don't really need it or could be covered by other things. I remember before I 100% settled on this, I was looking at maybe I could do counselling, but there are like counselling degrees, not psychology degrees, so those two things don't match up. Yeah. Or there's like there are like youth work degrees now as well. So to do youth work, you're meant to have a degree to do it, and it's just not even like a degree, like a degree specifically in that one area. Yeah,
and I think the problem with those types of degrees are they are not transferable. Like not transferable. The benefit of like a bland psychology degree is that it is transferable. You can say, okay, well, I can now go into advertising, or I can go into teaching because I did developmental psychology. Say, I can go into psychology as it is.
Yeah.
Or go into youth work. You can, or counselling. You can have all these options available to you because you've done a bland degree. Not bland, but like a generic degree. But then all these specific degrees that you need to have actually prevent those people that have done the generic degree in order to get open avenues from having those jobs in the first place.
I think with something like a youth work degree especially, it's not just that, it's like a really specific thing, because it is a really specific thing.
Yeah.
I suppose you could do that and then move yourself into teaching, but then you can pretty much do any degree and move yourself into teaching if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue with it is that it sort of sets you up for a job that pays about 19 grand a year. So
right.
It's like you're never going to get free of that debt that you're incurring.
Yeah.
By doing it.
Yeah.
And that just seems just a bit counterintuitive.
And there are plenty of jobs out there that you don't need degrees for that pay way more than 19 grand a year anyway. So what's the benefit of spending 3 years training for a job that
I think
you're not going to get entry level wages for?
Yeah, I think like bachelor's degrees in particular, because like the further and further away I get from finishing my bachelor's degree, the more I think you do those things too early. Like the more I think like I look at stuff now or a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever, and I went, oh, that would be a really cool job to do, but I can't do that now because I've done a bachelor's degree in something else, and it's like I'm making that decision at 22, 23.
Yeah.
And I don't think when you're younger, because I don't feel like I'm not young, I don't think like when you're younger, I don't think when you're like 16, people give you enough leeway to just not have any clue what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely, and especially at the school we went to, it was so pushed that you were going to go to university.
Oh yeah.
Because and they almost pushed the qualification you were going to go for as well. Like there was certain teachers that would go, you're going to go do this degree. You're going to go do this degree, and it's worked out for me because I'm still very much interested in the avenue that I went into. But for other people, it's closed a lot of avenues that they could have had going on, and then the people that didn't get degrees just got forgotten about as well. You know,
I don't think at that level, what was made clear is that there's certain things you need to then carry on with, like go do a psychology degree. Right, what do you do now? Well, if you want to do psychology, you do a master's degree, you do a doctorate. Because otherwise, you're not going anywhere in that career, really. Like, you went and got a master's degree so that you could work in the job that you're doing. Like, I didn't want to do that afterwards. And it's just like, can you get a job in psychology? Yes. But not like...
No, but a psychology degree is like having A-levels in the psychology field.
Yeah.
It's literally the lowest denominator.
Yeah, well, our first year was just rehashing our psychology A-levels.
Well, this is it, and with psychology as a if you want to go into be a psychologist, just having a psychology degree means nothing, basically nothing.
Yeah.
You have to go on to do a master's. You have to go on to do either a PhD or then train as a psychologist.
I was reading something recently about those, like, two of those really, really famous psychology cases that get brought up in those kind of courses, the Key Genovese case and the Stanford prison experiment, and how basically everything that's reported about them and talked about them just isn't really accurate. Like the Key Genovese case, people did bring her into the lobby and phone the police and stuff was being done, and all you ever hear is, you know, she was out there screaming, being attacked, and an entire tower block of people watched it happen and did nothing. But that's not really what happened.
Right.
And then the Stanford prison experiment, people were basically being paid as actors and were going along with it because he was like saying, all right, and then you're going to do this and you're going to do this.
Right.
And then it's reported in those like introduction to psychology courses, which is kind of what we did really.
Yeah.
As like fact, this is what happened. And it's like,
yeah. And it doesn't help with that new movie that's come out that's on Netflix at the moment.
I haven't watched it.
I think it's called Stanford Prison Experiment, or it's called Stanford or something like that. But it not only misleads people in that sense, you know, people thought that's what he wanted them to do, and that kind of, and also he was telling them to do that kind of stuff. But also the extent to which they were humiliating them and all that stuff is nowhere near as much as people think it is.
Yeah.
So there was no actual physical assaults. There was definitely no sexual assaults, which I think the movie portrays. I'm not sure. I haven't watched it either, but I think I heard that it portrays sexual assaults and stuff. It was more.
Let's not.
I think
let's not tar the filmmakers with that brush.
Well, you know, I'm not sure. I can't say it but if it does, you know, like, and I think I do think they did stuff like shave their head, but I think the prisoners kind of went along with that as well to a certain extent. So it is, it's massively overplayed how much. Specifically Stanford Prison Experiment, and I guess now I didn't know that about Kitty Genovese.
I don't know how accurate that is. It's just I read it from a different source.
But yeah, and it's important to do that. It's important to read different sources and stuff. I mean, psychology has a history of like there was a study that came out. I think it was about 4 years ago. That showed social psychology specifically is really hard to replicate. The studies that come out.
Yeah, which basically tells you that is.
I think and that's the issue I've had with social psychology specifically for years, is that they seem to be, the social experiments that they seem to do, because if they're effectively social experiments, are very manipulated a lot of the time. Milgram, I think, is the only one that they have shown that is Milgram's done across cultures, across they've repeated that multiple times, and it's always come across the same results.
Basically. But I always had a problem with evolutionary psychology as well.
Yeah.
So I think there was always aspects of it that you kind of looked at and you just went...
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember reading an article about how depression is a evolutionary thing, like an evolution...
Is this the one where it's to try and get people to come and help you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's all, like, literally that's just saying... That is just looking... That's entire inference. There was no experiment to suggest that was the case and stuff. It was very weird. I
always thought about the sort of circular logic of it. It was always, we do this because in the past we used to do this, and we know in the past we used to do this because of what we do now.
Yeah.
And it's like that circular logic just feeds into itself, and there's actually no real sort of genesis point for fact.
Yeah, I do think evolutionary psychology has some merit. I think you have to really look at the studies with evolutionary psychology, and you have to look at the research extremely carefully.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it, psychology isn't still in its infancy, I think.
It's 120, 30 years old.
Yeah, and you got physics and chemistry and biology that are like, what, 500, 600 years old?
Yeah.
Minimum, and then you got them going back to the Greeks as well. Psychology was a little bit of the Greeks, but most of it was...
There's some ideas, but they're more based in philosophy than they are psychology.
Exactly, and most... but I mean, with... Yeah, like physics, trigonometry, maths, all of that stuff was definitely happening with the Greeks. So, we're... really far behind in that term. So I think we need to. I say we. I'm talking about it as if. I think psychology needs to develop.
Yeah, I'm out.
It's you're out of it. Yeah. I think psychology needs to develop its scientific process a lot better, and then I think it'll be taken more seriously.
I think that's the thing. I thought that was an interesting thing when we were in sixth form doing it as an A level compared to when we were doing it at university. Is that in sixth form there was talk of a debate of is psychology a science, and the minute we got to university, I never ever heard any lecturers or anyone that was like doing psychology professionally ever question whether or not what they were doing was actually scientific.
Yeah, and I found it very interesting going along that you could see the grades of scientific process. So you could see, for me, social psychology is the thing that's least scientific. Well, no, actually, evolutionary psychology and
social psychology has just too much of an overlay with sociology. Which is again, I think probably sociology has more merit than we give it credit for at the time.
Yeah.
And social psychology has less merit than we give it for at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But definitely cognitive and things like cognitive I think is the main one that has kind of more scientific backing, because it's especially when it comes down to neuroscience of it.
Yeah.
Because you can't question nerves and you can't question the biology.
Yeah, the biological stuff is like a lot easier, but then at the same time I know this is like a factual thing that's there. There's like brain plasticity and
which and this is the thing, we're so new on that stuff that like we had a guy come in during my masters. It was a guest lecturer doing a seminar, and he talked about language development. And you know how like the common theory is about Broca's area and Wernicke's area.
Yeah.
He was talking. He basically showed us a map that he had developed over like about 5 years of research of language in the brain, and it was all over the brain. It was literally everywhere, and I was like, okay, like that. Well, that's throwing it's about pathways and not about areas.
There's that
more
thing
so.
that never
It's
really made
weird.
sense to me when talking about that.
That's
When,
on that note, like.
Yeah, he fired. The thing that never really made sense to me about that was when you looked at bilingual people and different kinds of bilingualism. So obviously there's the bilingualism where you learn both at a really young age. So like you learn English and French at the same time as you're growing up. Like two separate people speak it to you, and you just learn two separate languages, and you manage to know that they're different things. And when you scan the brain, as people look at those things, the same area lights up. And then there's the kind where you speak English at home, and then somewhere else you learn French, and two separate areas light up.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, that kind of always seemed a bit odd to me if language centres were just like...
Specific places, yeah.
But I can't actually, if I'm honest, I can't say I've really overthought of it too much.
No.
I think my problem... To get back to the subject that we were originally going to talk about, which wasn't psychology at all.
No, not psychology. Well, I mean, well...
I think my problem going into that kind of thing was I was way too good at taking the information I was given and just running with that and just going, cool. So that's the fact, and then we can just go through with it.
Yeah.
Which, rolling all the way back to education, is what I think schools do.
I think so as well. I agree with you there. It's and definitely the school we went to was hard. Their main focus, and I think that's become worse since we were at school, is making students pass exams.
So the problem that grammar schools have is that they're designed so that poor children in poor areas can get a better education. The idea is that you, at 11 years old, you pick out the smart kids from a poor population and you give them a better schooling, because middle class kids and rich kids get to go to private schools. They get to go to schools where they just meet people from really rich backgrounds, from really interesting, diverse places. Well, not diverse, the exact opposite of diverse. Really wealthy backgrounds and have really high quality teaching. Whereas like the old comprehensive system supposedly didn't have that. And instead what you find is that grammar schools are filled with mostly middle class children.
Middle class children that live in poor areas.
Middle class children who live in poor areas whose parents, if they wanted to, probably could afford to send them to private schools.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that in itself, and then there's the added thing of are grammar schools essentially not the pressures put on children in grammar schools are kind of like what's the word, synthetic in a lot of ways, isn't it, compared to comprehensive schools, or it's more, they're more pushed towards A's and B's are good grades, but a C is a bad grade, and then in comprehensive school B's and C's are bad grades and an A is a great grade. No, sorry, B's and C's are good grades and an A is like is unattainable.
It's fantastic.
It's fantastic.
You're lucky to get that.
Yeah.
So it's ability grouping on like a massive scale.
Yeah.
So in classes you often have children. So in classes you have to differentiate. Like in primary school in particular, you have to differentiate. When people come in, they expect to see at least 3 levels of differentiation. And that means that children are put into ability groups.
Yeah.
So there'll be like a top tier, like a just below top tier, a slap bang in the middle, slightly worse than that, and then what is essentially your thick kids group. And what happens if you separate them into those ability groupings is that's where they stay.
Yeah.
Like, they don't get better. They don't move between the three. They don't move between the groups. The group at the bottom does much, much worse than if they were mixed in with each other.
Yeah.
The group at the top does worse as well. Like, it's an interesting thing. Like, you would think that the group at the top would excel, and the group at the top do the best, but they actually do worse than if they're interacting with children with different ideas.
And do you think that's because they don't have the opportunity to, like, one way that I know I learn is by teaching. And so if you're not teaching someone else how to do something, then it might be that you don't understand it as well as if you were teaching them.
I think that's definitely it. Because if you're teaching something, if you're teaching someone something and they don't get it, you have to find a different way of explaining it to them.
Yeah.
And sometimes that different way of explaining it to them expands your understanding of it as well.
Yeah.
So you, instead of thinking of it in the one way that you've got it, you then think of it in a slightly different way, and it still works.
Yeah.
And it makes your understanding just a bit deeper, just a bit wider than it was before. So yeah, definitely, I think that is partly it.
So grammar schools are that kind of ability grouping, but on a macro kind of level.
Grammar schools are that on a huge scale, and with added
socioeconomic factors.
Well, and with added socioeconomic factors, but also with added massive arrogance.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember hearing people. I don't think I was ever one of these people, but I may have been. But I remember hearing people saying, "Well, I go to a grammar school, and those people that go to comprehensive schools, they're just stupid and stuff like that." You know.
I think Well, okay. So we obviously both went to the same grammar school.
Yeah.
And literally directly next to our school was a comprehensive, and then around the corner was another comprehensive. And I've since leaving the school, since going to university, I've met adults who went to those other schools. Intelligent adults that, you talk to and you don't think, oh, this person's an idiot. But when you're 14 and you're told over and over again for years that you are in the top 25%, you're really clever, everyone here is really clever, you believe it. Like, you do believe it.
Yeah. And that does become, I guess, entrenched in your identity as well.
I think that's something...
Being a smart person becomes really important to you.
I think that's something that I've sort of... like grown out of somewhat. That, like, being now... What is it? I know it's only... Like, the thing is I always think when we're talking about this kind of stuff, that someone who's, like, much older than us probably looks at us and thinks... Look at them thinking they have answers to things while they're 25.
No, it's true though, isn't it? It is true.
But I think 7 years out of a grammar school, has kind of taken away from me almost entirely the idea that I am cleverer than any other person, really.
This is a good thing, actually. There's a book that I read by someone that I know you'd hate called Jordan Peterson. and in it, that basically it's called 12 Rules for Life, and I don't agree with everything in the book. I think some of the stuff he says is ridiculous, but one of the rules is assume everyone you talk to knows something that you don't. And I think that is one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard in terms of like, you know what, actually that's true. Even if you know everything you need to know about a specific subject, they know more about themselves and they know more about their lives and everything like that than you could know at all.
I think that is true.
Just having that approach to people is really important, I think.
I really do think so. This is something I used to scoff at, and I'm sure there'll be people who listen to this or watch it or whatever who'll scoff at it as well. But I really do genuinely think now that intelligence, as we sort of see it, is really delineated into one area, and people who are like clever, what they are is good at passing exams.
Yeah.
Or good at explaining something like mathsy.
Yeah, and I think that is encouraged by our school system. Like massively encouraged by our school system.
It's definitely encouraged by the grammar schools, because the grammar schools tell you that you're really clever, and then they don't do anything creative or interesting really.
Yeah.
Like when I used to work in a secondary school, the sort of intelligence in that grammar school sense was lower, right? If you're going to go into it like that, if you're going to just accept it as face value as that's what intelligence is, it was lower. But they had much better food tech facilities, they had much better sports facilities, they had much better dance facilities, they had much better drama and art centres than we did. They had Max for photography, they had all of this other stuff around it, because they went, right, some of these children might not pass like an English GCSE, they might not pass an English maths GCSE, but they've got talents.
Yeah,
they've got talents.
Yeah.
Like they used to take them off. The older kids, they used to take them off site, and they would once a week, and they do something else as well. They do like a building course, or like with normally girls, like a hair and beauty type thing as well.
Yeah,
which our school did not leave any room for.
No, not at all.
Like it was all academic.
No. And
academic stuff is what the school system is built up to want you to do.
Yeah, and it's what universities want as well. A lot of them, I think, they want a maths GCSE or a maths A level, or well, not maths A level, but they want those regardless of what degree you're going into. They want those things. They want you to have passed a GCSE in maths or English,
and I think
just so you can write an essay.
Yeah,
for whatever reason, you know.
I had a sort of like passing thought a while, like a couple of years ago, really, that kind of stuck with me a little bit, and I kind of think like the education system is sort of built to keep people in the education system. Like university creates academics, it creates people who sit around and have philosophical discussions about education.
That's true.
Without doing
that's
anything.
True. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, well, my stepdad, who dropped out of school at 14, has, you know, paid off his mortgage and lived a pretty decent life in the end. And like his weekends, he used to spend his weekdays working, and then his weekends doing a different job, running his own business. And you kind of go, like, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm not saying that's better, but it's different, and the school system doesn't allow for that to be classed as intelligence.
And I guess the problem is as well that exams and passing exams is so entrenched in children from primary school now. It's not even just secondary school. I mean, the 11 plus is one thing, but like there's lots of exams now.
There's lots and lots of exams. So SATs in particular in the primary school setting that I've been in is just the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
It's just year 2. I've worked in my training year, which I've just finished, which I believe is introduced in the first video.
Yeah.
It still continues. My first year, I worked in 2 SATs years, which is year 2, which are 5 and 6 year olds, and year 6, which are 10 and 11 year olds. And the year 2 ones are so that you can get a read on where they are at this exact point. And the year 6 ones are so that you can see how many levels of progress they have made from year 2 to year 6. And without getting into too much detail on it, because it's very boring, basically there's like a set amount of levels of progress that a child is supposed to make from year 2 to year 6. And if you do that, if they make those many levels of progress, that's good. You've done good. If they make more, you've done brilliantly, and if they make less, you've not done great. So essentially, what those exams are, what those tests are to see how the school is doing.
Yeah.
But that's not how it's sold to the children.
No, and I think that's the problem, is that, like, I think in the Lost video, you were talking about Chris and how his approach to exams is very much like, how are we going to assess the children, how well the children are doing?
Yeah.
And I agree that assessments for seeing how the children are doing is important. You have to understand how well a kid is doing in order to see how much more input they need, or how much more, like, whether they're on the right track and stuff like that. But when it's in the benefit of the school, when it's going to outside agencies, it really forces a business-like model of, okay, well, we're going to, rather than teach children how to think independently and how to, and just teach them facts about things, like facts about history, you teach them how to pass the exam from that very young age. Do you see what I mean? So that you look better, even though you might not be as good as you
I do understand what you're saying. What I would say is I've spent a lot of this year talking about assessment.
Yeah.
Partly because the current government decides that testing is very, very important.
Yeah.
Assessment doesn't need to be done in tests at the end of the year. You can do assessment, and in fact you are required to do assessment throughout the year.
Right.
Like, you mark all their work. You have a look at everything they do.
Yeah, I get to
You interact with them all the time. Like, you know what that child knows.
Yeah.
Like, you know if that child's got it or not, because you look at their work at the end of the lesson, you go, well, they haven't got this, or they have got this. And then you change your planning. Like, if you look through an entire class's work and you go, well, they haven't got this, you don't then just ignore it and carry on and wait till the exam comes around.
Yeah,
you
and I guess the exam is just proof, isn't it?
And do that.
Yeah.
The exams, I think exams, when you get to a certain point, have a purpose, and they can help tell like other organisations how this one child's done. But for primary schools especially, I don't really see the point in doing those tests, because if you've got a teacher who works with them for an entire year and then says to you they can do this really well, this really well, this really well, and then all of that work is then moderated, which it is all the time, it's all moderated, it's all checked by the other teachers in the school. They check the marking, they look at the mark scheme themselves, they say, well, I agree with you here, I don't agree with you here, I'd mark this a bit lower, I'd mark this a bit higher. I don't really see the need of them going, here's an exam.
No.
Because you've got a year's worth of
evidence.
evidence.
I didn't even think of that stuff, to be honest. Because I guess because it's so ingrained in me, and I'm not in the system, that exams are the way that we assess children, and that kind of like dynamic assessment throughout the year by the teacher, especially in primary school when you have an individual teacher for a whole school set the whole time. Like that's a better way of doing it, and that's also probably a more accurate portrayal of that child's development.
Those dynamic assessment, you've called them dynamic assessments.
Well, they're dynamic in the terms of like they're not like I would say that's dynamic because it's across the whole year, and then an exam is like a snapshot. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. In terms of what the words we used to describe assessment essentially were, formative and summative.
Right.
So formative assessment is the stuff that you do that's ongoing, like you're in a class and you ask questions and someone puts their hand up and they get the answer right or wrong, and you in that moment you go, right, they don't know this, they don't know this. You ask them how they know it, right? That's the formative assessment. And if they don't know it, you peel it back a bit to try and get them to the point where they do know it. And summative assessment, exams are the big example of summative assessment, like it's summary at the end. But that marking something afterwards, marking the work afterwards, is also summative assessment.
Right, okay.
So, like, to me, they're the same thing. I don't see the need to, spend all of your time going, oh, we'll work on this one bit, or we'll work on this one bit, and we'll work really hard to make sure that you get everything. Oh, there's a wasp in the room.
I don't like that.
Anyway.
Well, that's the wasp. We meet again.
If
there's a lot of wasps around at the moment. Don't you dare come near me.
Land, so I can put my count on you. This is not very good for a summative assessment. No, he's too quick. Alright, anyway. He's tiny, it's fine.
Oh no, that didn't help.
You missed him. You've just angered him. this will. I know you said you don't cut these, but I feel like a.
Oh no! There we go.
There we go.
Cool.
He's got him. He's trapped a bit of him. Anyway.
Oh, have I? I'm a vegetarian.
Good protein in insects, I hear.
There is. Sorry, carry on with what you were saying.
Essentially, like, the gist of what I'm trying to get at is I don't think those tests really serve much of a purpose other than assessing the school.
Yeah.
Especially because when you think about Year 6 SATs, those children already know what secondary schools they're going to.
Yeah.
Secondary schools, I feel don't really say to someone, well, now your child can't come here anymore because their SAT results are really bad.
Yeah.
They decide what set they're going to be in.
I mean, that only really happens with the 11 plus and grammar schools, doesn't it? Like, and if we're going to look, like, so just moving on slightly from this, when you're assessing schools and you're assessing grammar schools and you're assessing comprehensive schools and then private schools on top of that, generally speaking, you're going to find that the grammar schools and the private schools do better than the comprehensive schools. Probably the private schools do better in terms of these exams than
the private
grammar
schools.
schools.
Yeah.
But then when you get to university level, and people get their degrees at the end of their 3 years in university, there is evidence to show that there's no difference in the ability of those of the difference between a private school, a grammar school, and a comprehensive. The only difference is the number of people that go from those schools to grammar schools, to university. That's the only difference. So you have more people going from private school and grammar schools to university in the first place.
And I think that goes back to like expectation. Like if you're a working class kid whose entire family are, I don't want to belittle builders, but let's say their entire family are builders, and you go to a comprehensive school and they say, oh, you'll do well if you pass any of these GCSEs, and then you don't pass any of them, and then you go and do an apprenticeship on a building site or something.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing wrong with that. Perfect, reasonable thing to do with your life, yeah?
Yeah.
But no one at any point ever said to you, oh, do you think that, like, Oxford might be an opportunity?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. No one even brought it up.
And for me, when I was a kid, and I'm not from, I'm realistically, I'm not from a particularly middle-class background. I'm not from, like, the most destitute background in the world either. Like, it was fine, right?
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, I was told from a very young age, oh, you're really clever and you could go to university. And when I was like 5, 6 years old, I was like, I'm going to go to Oxford. Okay, I didn't, but I still went to university. Like that was an option. Yeah. That was an expectation from a very young age. And I think that's part of it. Like no one ever said...
Sorry, I'm just checking time.
That's fine.
Cool.
No one ever said...
We've got 10 minutes. Let's get it right this time.
Let's do this. No one ever said, like, you know, well, maybe set your aims a bit lower. Yeah. And the things that they did, like the things that I was told, oh, maybe that's a bit much, I struggle to do. Mm. So if it's not even presented to you as an option, I think it becomes, like...
Not an option.
Yeah. It just stops
being and I think that's a large part of it. I definitely think that's a large part of it. That was definitely a large part of it with my sister, Lindsay. She is... Well, she was talking not that... I think maybe it was about a year or 2 years ago, but she was talking not that long ago about going to university. She dropped out of AS levels. She didn't do particularly well in her GCSEs.
Yeah.
She was a truant a lot of the time when she was at school. She is one of the most intelligent people. Like, she knows so much. She's so well read now, and that will come out of working at Waterstones and her being given a passion for it. That come out of having a good experience with books. And then she found a passion for it, and then went and pursued it, and now she's a librarian, one of the only librarians in Kent. Like, there's only a few of them, and she's doing really well. And she thought, okay, now I can go to university, and she'd do really well at uni. But they just didn't give that. They didn't impassion her enough.
It's difficult. I mean? It's difficult to like.
And I'm sure they just gave up on her because she was truant.
Yeah, it's difficult to like the ideal way of teaching people is to teach every single person as an individual and say this is what this exact person needs and do that and differentiate it to like 30 people and then I'm sure they'd all get like they'd all do really well if you could do that time, but you can't it's an interesting thing. I think like what I used to tell children who were reading books that they weren't into, like with reading in particular, it's quite difficult. But what I used to tell them was, like, if they were halfway through it and they said, no, I don't like it, it's boring, I just told them to stop reading it. It's like, well, don't read it then. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Find something better.
Yeah.
Find something you do like. Find something you're interested in.
Yeah, and they might find it interesting. I feel like a lot of these books, people find them more interesting when they're older.
Mm.
And it's not so much about the... it's not so much about the content. No, it's more about the content and less about the language used.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I could read a harder piece of literature now than I could when I was 16.
Definitely.
Do you see what I mean?
And when you're 16, they say to you like, this piece of literature is really important, and you're going to read it, and it's going to be like a massive thing. And it's like often not, because you don't get it. Like, how could you get a lot of it? Like, it doesn't relate to you in any way.
Yeah.
Like, so for example, I think Shakespeare is a really good example, because I think Shakespeare is something that lots of children and young people like hate. Right?
Yeah.
And there's some Shakespeare I hate. I hate every Shakespeare comedy that I've read, because in my head it's meant to be a comedy and then it's meant to be funny. I'm aware that actually what it means is that it's a tragedy where no one dies at the end. That's essentially what it means.
Okay.
But in my head it's meant to be funny, and I'm reading it and it's like I've got to dissect it to even get to the point where I get what the joke is. It's not funny. But when I was like 16 and I read Hamlet, I loved it.
Yeah.
Because Hamlet was essentially this character who was depressed and who couldn't make any decisions and like didn't know what to do with his life, and then at the end everyone died, which was a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, that was like
was
my
great.
experience with Macbeth as well. Because I was a bit not quite an emo, but I was into like I was like into dark stuff. And then Macbeth was just the perfect dark.
You wore different hats back then, yeah.
I did. I wore beanies.
Yeah.
Yeah, with like metal like band logos and badges on them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that wasp just moved the glass.
I swear the wasp just moved the glass, man.
It's a massive wasp.
How long we got? We've got about 5 minutes. So, if we start to kind of wrap things up just a little bit.
Okay.
What would you say was kind of the biggest thing that you've learned on your journey from being in education to moving into further education and then moving into being a part of the system of education?
The two things that I feel like I'm going to kind of ignore the question and answer one about like the last sort of about moving from not really doing like the last year or so.
Okay, yeah, that's
like
fair
2
enough.
years.
Yeah.
And I think it encompasses a longer time. It's taken longer than that to do it, but really like it's the last year that these sort of stuff have become more apparent. And I think the two things are that, first of all, I'm not entirely sure how much I believe in the idea of intelligence anymore.
Right.
Like, I used to believe that I was really, really clever, and I think maybe what I was really good at was putting forward arguments like this and passing exams, which I don't think necessarily makes me particularly intelligent. Like, I can...
Well, do you think it's your kind of interpretation of intelligence is about being functional and capable?
I think what my interpretation...
Do you see what I mean? Like,
I think what my interpretation of intelligence is now is more about your ability to do like sort of complex problem solving things and understand, like, I know that I can understand things quicker than other people that I've met. Like, I know that. So that and that sort of things, I think I am, but I don't think I'm like exceptionally intelligent anymore. And I think part of my idea of intelligence is based on the schools people went to and the grades they got and stuff. And now I've spent so much time working with like children of different intelligence and different abilities, and it's just like, no, but they are clever. Like, if I talk to them about this, they're geniuses. They know exactly what it is. If I talk to them about this, they don't have any clue. But it's not because they're not intelligent. It's because they're not interested.
Yeah. Or and they're just the way that they function. They can function better. So let's use someone that's particularly sporty as an example. They can function better in a sports situation than they can in a maths situation. But that doesn't mean that their worth should be valued on the maths.
Yeah.
There's that great drawing, isn't there, of like about exams and testing, and it's got all these different animals, and the test is who can go up to climb a tree. Yeah. And there's the monkey, and the monkey's like, oh, this is going to be easy, and then the rest are just like, what the hell am I supposed to do?
Yeah, and I think
that's a really good way of looking at intelligence, and
that's kind of what I'm getting at, and I think that's something that I always scoffed at in the past.
Yeah.
And I think I don't have the right to do that anymore because it's just not.
Yeah.
It's just not accurate. And the other thing that I think has been really important, especially in the last year, is just like a level of resilience that like I didn't know was there.
What, in you?
In myself.
Yeah.
And I think it just in general is something that people need. Like, you know as well as anyone how much I wanted to quit my teaching course.
Yeah.
Between, actually you don't know quite as well as anyone, a girl named Debbie, who is essentially part of the reason why I'm like through this, and it was an amazing friend.
Yeah.
Like, I told her pretty much every day for about 12 weeks that I wanted to quit this course, and I hated it. And now like I'm at the other end of it, and I'm really looking forward to the next year, and like the second half of it was amazing.
Yeah.
And as much as I wanted to leave it, I was there and I was like, I know I'm going to regret it if I go.
Yeah, and I am extremely proud of you that you managed to get through it.
Oh, thanks.
No, genuinely, because I think I had to a certain. I knew what you were like through the psychology degree, and I knew that you kind of wanted to quit that, but you were like, I might as well just finish it. So I knew that it must have been really bad for you to be like, I'm gonna quit this. Like, I'm actually gonna do it.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, don't do it, because a year's not that long. You'll get through it. You'll have a qualification at the end. If you use it or not, that doesn't matter. But
and I think that's it's
important.
I think that's something that just at some point that everyone needs to be able to do is just like say to yourself, like, now is pretty shit, but now is temporary. I think like that's the thing that's been like hardest for me to learn this year, is that you just need to sort of own a space and be confident in yourself. And like right now I'm doing the youth work, and I've been telling them the exact same thing. Like, I said to them, you just need to go into it like you're confident, because eventually, it's another thing that I've scoffed at before in the past. It's another thing that sounds really self-helpy and rubbish. Like, just be confident, fake it till you make it, that phrase. And it's like, it's actually probably the most true thing.
And I think a lot of people, when they're put into situations that they find uncomfortable or new, will actually be able to adapt to it really quicker than they expect to be able to adapt to it when they first start. And I think that it's that having that confidence that will allow you to do it.
Yeah, and I don't think...
So
I think that's something that you can't teach someone through exams or through what we do in the education system. I think, like, you can teach it through projects.
Yeah.
Like, people get that through projects because, like, we talked separately about teamwork and stuff and collaboration. And it's that, like, when you're in that group setting, sometimes people aren't pulling their weight, and you need to be the one that pulls through, even if it's really hard. Like, you need to keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's crazy how difficult it is.
It is.
But yeah.
But I think that's the perfect note to end on, and I think that...
Keep on keeping on.
No, it's a great sentiment. And I think it's rounded everything off quite nicely.
I do, yeah. We didn't really talk about resilience in any way in the build-up, and then I made it up as like
no,
a
but
major point.
That's perfect. And I think as a personal journey, I'm proud of you. You should be proud of yourself.
I'll give you a hug, but I'm very sweaty right now.
No, come on. Let's do it. Let's end on a hug. There we go.